Amazing. My name's Jeannie Heaton, and it's funny, there's a thing called creeping determinism, which means like when something's sort of been placed in your life or you've heard of something, or it means that you live it out. My last name is Heat On, turn the heat on. And I'm a hot yoga teacher, so how weird is that? Anyway, so all these great stories today of transformation and redemption and finding a way out of crazy struggle and suffering. And I love how, Chris was saying, it doesn't matter, like, who hasn't suffered, you don't have to have syringes in your arms and crack pipes in your mouth, and, you can have 2 glasses of wine, at dinner and be like bottoming out on that. You can have, 18 cookies and you buy the cookies and you can't stop. Like, whatever it is for you that's on the outside, the toxic relationship, the unhealthy choices, the staying on the cell phone, hunched over a computer, not getting that hit from how many likes did I get, right? My quote, like who likes my quote? And I'm always looking to see, oh yeah, like they shared it 500 times, like, man, I'm big now, 15 minutes of fame, like whatever that is, like that is a spiritual hit, right? That's a hit. Right, that I call filling that God-sized hole. You don't like the word God, you can use good orderly direction, you can use spirit of the universe, you can use conscious contact with something greater than you. I tend to use, like last night when Kelly pulled up in her house and I was like, all the lights went out and I went, holy shit, it's dark. Because I'm from the city, I'm from New York City, and I'm like, it's really dark here. And she goes, look up. And I looked up, and the stars were off the hook. I was like, where am I? And it's a log cabin, and it's like Portland, Maine. This is like everything that I actually thought I was coming to, and you supplied it. It was amazing. So you guys really do, you live up to it. I want to thank Angela and Michael and Kelly, Ted, that was amazing. Like, I don't even know, I got nothing to say after that. He said it all, right? And everybody, all the people, Chris and Joe, and, walking in circles of truth today is not easy. So when people get up here and they share their truth or their story, they tell their story so that they can hopefully help another person, it takes tremendous courage. And so I thank you all for showing me, that's what we do today. And yoga is so amazing because it helps you to see the truth and continue to walk in circles of truth. Because once you start to get in touch with that body, and we're talking hatha yoga, guys. So there's many different kinds of yogas. There's chanting yoga. There's meditation, Vedanta yoga, there's all kinds of yoga. And so what yoga is medicine here is hatha yoga. So we're talking about physically moving your body to be in your body to heal your body. So I really want to be clear about that because I think that, there's Raja yoga, there's many kinds of yoga. In Western culture, it's like it's becoming bastardized, like this sort of idea that, yoga, I go to yoga, get mad, I go to, and there's just a lot of, it's just becoming like sort of this, I don't know, merchandised, marketed, and I feel like a lot of the benefits of what's happening with yoga are being lost in the world, and I don't want to discount any other kind of yoga. For me, I feel like, 12-step recovery is a lot of my yoga. So basically, I'll just begin. How much time should I go for? When should I end? Okay, perfect. So basically, what happened to me was I grew up in a little town. I'm not going to take you through my whole, we've heard a lot of stories today, so I really want to try to stick to you know, what I'm doing today to try to stay sober, because I'll tell you, that is hearing the solution. Like, it's really important. So I won't, when I say I was born in a town, like, I don't want you to freak out, like, oh my God, here we go, we're gonna have to hear this whole, no, I'm not gonna do that to you. But I was born in a town, no. Anyway, I grew up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, called Latrobe, Pennsylvania. And if you just think deer hunter, that's sort of how I grew up. It was like a double wide. I wasn't in a double wide, but I lived sort of in a town where they hunted deer, and my brother still lives there. He does live in a double wide today. I don't think it's a double wide. I think it's a single wide. And he hunts deer, and it's really cool, and he makes venison out of it. He smokes a ton of weed, and he loves to drink beer, and that's his life, and he's, you know, whatever, he's happy. My other brother, so I grew up in a family where there was a lot of dysfunction like that. I'll never forget when I was a kid, my mom washed my brothers, did the laundry, and there was an ounce of pot that went through the wash. And I was the littlest one, and I remember my mother went crazy, like the whole house was crazy. My house was kind of crazy. This is my middle brother. My older brother was a total nut job too. And then I was the little one trying to like hold it all together in this house. And I don't blame any of that on my addiction and what happened to me in my life, but I will tell you that family pathology is very important to look at in addiction and in why people use to oblivion and death. Not that we do it because of childhood or because of trauma, because I have many friends who had beautiful lives being raised, and they're addicts, alcoholics, and used to the gates of death. So my story is just my story, but I did have a pretty traumatic upbringing. And so I wanted to get out of that town. I moved to New York City. I wanted to be a rock star, and I wanted to be an actor. And so I went to New York, and I went to school there. I went to NYU, and I thought this is going to be the answer to everything. I ended up meeting some crazy rock and roller guy, and kind of started a band, and found heroin, to make a long story short. And it's a long story. So basically, we ended up sort of getting record deals and kind of going around. It was the late 80s, early 90s, same story. I feel like Chris Joe, we all got the same like rocker story. I ended up in London. That's the first time where I smoked more brown heroin. So how did I get there? I don't know. I really don't know how it happened, because every step of the way, I always felt like I'm never going to be like my brothers. I'm never going to be like that. A little bit like Chris, like I'm never, ever going to end up that person. And every step of the way, I'd be like, hey, you want to try this? Hey, you want to do this? Hey, you want to do that? And I would be like, yeah, let's do, and it just, every step of the way, I would say yes to these things. And I guess if you would look back now, you might say peer pressure. I guess if you this, if that. But I remember the first time that I drank and used, I had felt like, first of all, succumbing to that pressure of it, and then doing it, and then feeling like, whoa, and then feeling that community of it, and then being everybody together in it. I loved that. I felt like, I never wanted the party to end. I never wanted the party to end. And so what happened to me is that I kept the party going, and everybody else was going about their lives. They were going home, they were going to bed, they were getting married, they were having kids, and I was still like, didn't want the party to end. And I didn't want the party to end so badly that I ended up in my final, I had lost apartments. I say all the apartments I had and all the stuff I had, it went up my arms. And that is the total truth. I had managed to, get money and have things and have all the outside stuff, and it all went into my arms. I was a functioning addict for a while, and then not functioning, and then, so what happened was I ended up in the Chelsea Hotel, where every good addict goes to die. I ended up in the Chelsea Hotel thinking that I was the shit, like totally broke, completely busted, doing whatever a young lady in New York needs to do to get the next one. And I started a fire. So I fell asleep. I was shooting up. I had a 22 bag a day heroin habit. I was doing 12 milligrams of Xanax a day and smoking as much crack as I could find. And when I couldn't smoke the crack, I would shoot coke and dope. So those were the substances that really brought me to my knees. But I have to tell you, when I ran out of, I ended up on a methadone program in New York City, methadone maintenance for 9 years. And when I ended up on that program, I found this little thing called Xanax. And Xanax mixed with methadone was like what really brought me to my knees. You would think all those other things, but that's what brought me to my knees. And I fell asleep one night at the Chelsea Hotel with a lit cigarette in between my legs. And the place went up, and I had been living there like 2.5 years, and the owner of the Chelsea Hotel finally threw me out. And it's Stanley Bard, and he doesn't throw out anybody. So it was that bad. I took my suitcase, and I was walking down 23rd Street in the pouring down rain, and I heard this voice say, "You are absolutely crazy. You need to go to Bellevue." And like that's where the crazy people go. So I tried to die at the Chelsea. I had no veins to really left. I'm a person who was born without good veins, thank God, or I would be dead. So I had a lot of bad abscesses and infections from missing and shooting up and not having veins to get a hit, to get off, as we say. And because of that, it's probably why I'm standing in front of you today, able to talk to you. Sometimes I think it's just that simple, like, wow, I just didn't have good veins. And of course, I've done a lot of other work. But anyway, so that's what happened. I ended up walking over to the hotel, the Bellevue mental ward, and they told me that because I had no booze in my body, they couldn't let me in. And I went downstairs, and there was a guy walking around with these cards, and it said, "Johnny, cut," and it was you need to detox, and I was like, oh God. And he's handing me this card, and I'm like, I know where to go. I had no money to buy beer or anything, or to get some booze in my system to be admitted. So he said, "Get in the car," and I was like, I get in the car. I get in the car with anybody at that point. Got in the car, and he took me to get my methadone. He took me to get dosed, and then he took me to ACI Detox, which is a city detox in New York, where I began this journey through a lot of trials, hard difficulties. I want to say, like, it hasn't been easy. That was 10 years ago this past July. God willing, in December, I will have 10 years sober from all substances. I had to go away for a long time. I had to go into a treatment center called Samaritan Village in New York. It's a therapeutic community where I had to go for 19 months and 1 day to detox methadone. While I was in that community, we sat around a lot and we talked a lot. We sat in groups and we talked and we smoked cigarettes after and before group and in between group and after every meal and after every dinner and after every lunch, and then we'd go back to group and we'd talk some more. And I was like, and I would go to the psychiatrist once a week, and she would prescribe like these MAIO inhibitors for my brain and, for all the trauma. And I would talk more about my trauma. And every time I would talk about the way I was living in the street and the way I was raised. And, there's like some incest and abuse issues in my childhood, my older brother. And so we would sit around and try to shrink ourselves. And it was like every time I would leave that shrink, I would go back to my room and I would be like wanting to pound my head against the wall. And I would want to get high, and I would want to leave, and I would pack, and I would scream to the heavens, like, "Dear God, please." And I packed to leave like 9 times, which is considered a dischargeable offense. So they wanted to discharge me for continuing to threaten to pack to leave. And I was like, well, if you would help, really help do something. Like, I couldn't process this trauma. And so finally, one night, they all took me to group. There's this thing called group, and a lot of people, well, it's an encounter group where they confront you on your behavior, and I was a lying, manipulative, angry drug addict recovering, and I was on 5 milligrams of methadone, and I wanted to kill you and your mother and your sister and your brother and myself. Hated everybody. I had attitude. I was horrible, angry human being. 9 people set their chairs across from me. They all shouted my name at the group, and they wanted to confront me on my behavior because I wasn't making my bed, and I had donuts in the dorm, and I had coffee under my sheets, and I had, I was doing everything wrong. I was smoking in the bathroom. They were sick of me. They were tired of me. They were tired of holding my negative anger and my negative behavior, and they all called me out on it. I got up out of the chair. I ran out of the room. I ran out the door. I ran out the front door. I went down the block. I stopped. It's snowing. It's December 5th, 2005, and it's got to be -5 degrees. I look up, and I see those stars, and I scream to the heavens. I'm like, motherfucker, if you're up there, excuse my French, but that's what I screamed. If you're up there, please help me, help me. And I dropped to my knees. I'm screaming to the heavens, and this wind comes around. I got no coat. I have nothing. I just left everything because I was told the truth about myself. And when you're told the truth about yourself, when you're an addict and you've done all this stuff, it really, really hurts when you don't have anything to numb yourself out. It's really scary and really hard to look at. It's hard for anybody. It's hard for anybody, not just an addict. Someone tells you the truth. I tell my yoga classes all the time. My first yoga teacher, he told me, you're way too young to be in this bad a shape. I wanted to throw my water bottle at him. I'm like, you know who you're talking to. And you know what? If you react, there's a truth in it. Somebody says something to you and you want to punch them in the face, you may need to look at it, right? So that's what I'm thinking. So when I ran down the block and I'm looking up at the heavens, I'm like, I hear that voice again. Walk up the block, go back, go back. Now, once you left the treatment center, you don't get back in. They don't let you in. You have to go through the whole reapplication process because they don't know what you did while you were out there. They don't know. There was also a liquor store right in the corner, closed because it's, because it was my higher power, Grace, looking out for me, totally closed. So I walked back up the block, tail between my legs, crying the whole way, so humbled, so humiliated, full of shame, full of guilt, hating everybody. All my issues are all over that community because I have no restraint of my mouth or the way I talk to people. I put my tail between my legs, and I know it's like this double door system where the door is going to be slammed shut. I'm not getting back in. There's no way. There's no way. And the doors popped open this much, guys. This much. Because it was so windy and it was so cold. Or, you know what they say, is it odd or is it God? Is it really the wind or was it divine intervention? So I snuck back in right between the double doors and I stood there. And the counselor walks by and goes, we've been looking for you everywhere. Where you been? In his New York accent. And I'm like, oh, Jimmy, no, I've been right here the whole time. And he's like, yeah, right. Get your ass in here. And he puts me on this chair and he lets me sit there for 3 days. 3 days. He puts me on the chair. I mean, he let me sleep. But he put me in this right in the middle of reception so everyone could walk by me and everyone could walk in and out and see me sitting there. And it was this sort of shame-based, more trauma-based. But for me, it kind of worked because I was finally safe from myself. Like, that sounds crazy. Like, I was horrified at having to sit there and be on display like that and being, like, totally lost and nowhere to go. But I was finally safe from myself. Sometimes when I'm in the yoga room and I'm on my yoga mat, I have that feeling of being like on that chair, on that mat, because that's the difficulty and the challenge of the class for me sometimes. So that's sort of how I got out of treatment. I ended up staying. I ended up getting off methadone. I stayed until they told me I needed to leave. I was like, no, you can't throw me out. Because now I'm ready. Now they're not going to let me stay anymore. They're like, this isn't a shelter. You got to go. So the minute I wanted to stay, they knew it was time for me to go. And I had nowhere to go. I had to kind of figure all that out and get a job. And, I got a little job while I was in there and saved some money. And